Okay.
Bill, if you're gonna be, you might want to sit at that microphone over there.
Good luck with that.
Oh, wait, no, you're right, that one doesn't work. Never mind. Sit where you're at. That sounds good. I apologize for that. You guys just share that one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We're both from modern, so it's okay.
We just want to give the impression that we have a sound system. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting for April 13th, executive meeting to order. Need a roll call?
Dick Pufall,
Here.
Mike Berlin,
Here.
Gary Mertig,
Here.
Bill Metzinger,
Here.
Martin Vitek,
Here.
all present.
Second on the agenda, approval of the agenda. We need a motion.
This is Gary Merdick. I'll make the motion.
Motion by Gary Mertig,
Marty Vitek, I'll second it.
seconded by Bill Metzinger. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Public comment period. Anyone in the public like to make a comment at this time? Nobody on any phones anywhere?
Hold on one moment, please. I have one that's in the chat room for a question. Clark, do you want to read it or do you want me to?
Go ahead.
As most studies say, remote working is less productive than in person, and most area businesses are reopened as are schools. The taxpayers of this county do need their services restored to in person and not emails that don't get answered as in-person visits do. Considering a loss in productivity, that financial gain does the county have to allow, what financial gain does the county have to allow remote working? As we all know, money is tight. I don't have anything else in the chat room, and I don't see any hands raised.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else want to make a comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on. A motion to approve executive meeting minutes from, we can do this blanket, right? Do them both?
Yep.
Meeting minutes from December 8th, 2020 and February 23rd, 2021. We need a motion to approve.
I will make that motion for
Motion by
approval.
Bill Metzinger. Do we have a second? Seconded by Marty Vitek. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Number 5 on the agenda, discussion and the referendum vote. Clark?
Yep, so I think this is a, we all know the vote was like, I don't know, 1,800, 1,200, something like that. And I think the issues that we'll be discussing on, concerning the ramifications of the referendum vote are going to be discussed in item 15, the budget process and review, and the American Rescue Plan Act. And I think those are the issues we'll be talking about. I guess the only thing we want to discuss at this point from a prosperity's sake is what if, because I see the county's going to have to do this at some point in the future, most likely in 2025 would be my gut guess. Is there any lessons that you can offer future staff for 2025 about this referendum?
This is Board Member Merdick. One thing that I heard loud and clear was there was some concern about the amount and justification that the county board was basically making some moves to save money. I think if we can go through the budget process this year, show the public that we're trying to save money in certain areas and if we go back to a referendum, I'm assured that we may need to do it for a lower amount.
Any other comments? Bill?
Supervisor Metzinger, how many eligible voters are in Ashland County? Because I think there was a low voter turnout. I think probably about 25%. I don't know if that's possible. From the people, I get around in the county quite a bit, and I had heard a lot of negative things about this amount that they were going to borrow. And so, you know, I kind of wondered if there would have been a bigger turnout, would have it passed or would have it failed by more? You know, what is, you know, with such a low turnout?
I don't have the numbers for me. I had heard it was around 20% turnout for this election overall, but I don't have the county number. And I think the clerk's offices are busy with, I think they're busy with, the auditors are here today, so. Any other comments?
All right. We'll move on to number 6, a discussion on WC UTA presentation.
Okay, we're a member of the Wisconsin County Utilities Tax Association. I think I brought this information up before. And basically what happens is you have utilities that don't pay property taxes. So in our case, we have a power plant here and they don't pay property taxes. They pay a complicated formula, which is inside this PowerPoint, which I will not go through. And it's by the megawatt and by the size, and there are state laws concerning when they get decommissioned, there's a step down because counties rely on it. We get around 200 some odd $1,000 that is within our shared revenue from this particular operation. So if it goes away, it's going to be a significant issue for us. One of the things that this organization is looking at is there's a 60-year-old law that how do they share the money. In 2019, the state collected $351 million in utility taxes and returned $75,000 to local governments. And so we're part of this organization along with 37 other counties, and we're basically lobbying either Department of Revenue, Governor's Office, and the Joint Legislative or Joint Fiscal Council to basically first figure out, can this formula be changed? Now, so if this formula would be changed, some money would have to come from somewhere. There would have to be money coming from the general revenues would have to be decreased to other departments within the state in order to increase this money that basically they're keeping. One of the things that I'm particularly pushing on is on the one of the last pages here, summary of utility taxes assessed within 2020. And so most of the money, you know, comes from this, you know, private, you know, power companies, but basically we don't get any money from pipelines or telecoms. And so that's one of the issues that is my passion, which is pipelines and telecoms all expect protection. They expect sheriff's department, they expect roads, they expect to have courts to prosecute people, they expect to have district attorneys for trespassing, but nothing ever comes down to the state. Now, I don't think it's their choice. I mean, Enron itself, they pay $48 million or something like that. I don't know what they pay like $48 million to the state, but none of it comes back here. So this is not an Enbridge, not Enron, Enbridge. This is not an Enbridge issue. This is a state issue. The state basically keeps that money. We have to convince the state that it's in the best interest of society to have these utility companies give back to the local communities that they expect services to be in. And so this is just an update. You can read the PowerPoint at your leisure. And there is more information here than you can shake a stick at. We had a meeting last week and they had 18 attachments to the meeting talking about different legislative issues, lobbying, trying to get individual members of the legislators to sign on, and we're making a little progress. So I don't have anything else to say on that. I think that's pretty self-explanatory and just for your education.
Any more discussion? Moving right along, then we'll move to item number 7, official county newspaper resolution.
Yep, so cities are required to designate an official newspaper. Counties are not. The issue was raised coming up when we had our last county board member vacancy and we advertised, and we don't have any, we never designated a county paper. So we're basically just for, just to have it on record, even though we don't have to, we're designating the Ashland County Daily Paper as the official county paper. And there's a resolution moved to recommend resolution 04/2021-1384 to the county board. And at the county board meeting would be moved to adopt the resolution. So this is basically just going to go right to the 20th. Kathy Schutte has a question, Dick.
I have a question, Dick. Can you hear me if I don't use the microphone?
I can hear you in Marengo.
So just from past history, the county board has had a local newspaper that they post their meetings and agenda things in. Ashland Daily Press does it one year, the Mellon Weekly Record does it the next year, and then Glidden paper, they alternate years. So it's Ashland, Mellon, Ashland, Glidden, and then they start over again. So are we still gonna have that in there?
That'll be up to the county board to decide. If you basically designate the Ashland Daily Press as your official paper, it'll be that way until you make another designation. When I was a city administrator in Minnesota outside St. Paul, we had a few different choices. And so every January, we basically just picked a different paper. So that would be something that I would see the county board making a decision. If they want to change every year, they could make this designation, but we've never done it before. So we're just going to designate this one. And if the county board wants to change it in January, they can change it.
Because like the Glidden paper and the Mellon paper, those are all county newspapers that come out on a weekly basis. So I would like to see that continued because they're doing it right now.
The Mellon paper is the only locally owned newspaper up in the county. And I think it would be equitable to spread it around what Kathy says. And we've done that in the past, and they publish the minutes and they're pushing notices in the Mellon paper because I get the Mellon paper. That's fine with me.
I was just asked to basically designate an official paper, so I'm designating an official paper. I'm making a recommendation to the county board, which has the power to do that. County board can designate another newspaper if they want. Or this committee, the executive committee, can make a recommendation to not have the Ashland Daily Paper as the official county newspaper. Being a non-official county newspaper doesn't mean you don't have to do the proceedings. I mean, like when you're doing the election results, you're going to do election results in the paper of the locale. But having the designation for official notices, such as, let's say, zoning or other types of notices that have to have these notices in them, that should have a designation to an official paper. That doesn't stop you from doing other things.
Yes, Marty.
In that case, I would make a motion that we recommend designating the Mellon Weekly Record as one.
The Mellon paper?
Mellon Weekly Record.
Mellon Weekly Record.
Okay.
I have no idea what Marty said there.
He basically is recommending that the Mellon Weekly paper be designated as the official county newspaper instead of Ashland. Right?
Right.
Yep.
Instead of the Daily Press?
Instead of the Ashland. So if they're going to designate one official newspaper, he wants the Mellon newspaper to be the official paper. And Pat has a comment.
Go ahead, Ben.
Do you have any idea when contractors are keeping their eyes out for things to bid on, road projects, equipment, et cetera, which newspapers they look at? And then Marty, do you know how much of an online presence the Mellon paper has?
I don't know.
Because if we're gonna get the best bid, we want to make sure everybody that's looking to bid on something is most likely to see it too, whether it's official paper or not.
I'll be just brutally honest. It's a perfunctory task to advertise in the newspaper for bids for things. Normally, we just reach out or do advertise on the internet. You know, so you know, the question you'd have to ask yourself if you said this is 1980, there isn't an internet, and you advertise for a bid for a pickup truck. Do you want to advertise it in the official county newspaper in Mellon and not Ashland? You know, that would be the questions you'd have to have. I'll be honest, I have not researched this very much. You know, so we could certainly find out from the clerk's office, find out would there be complications that we're going to be doubling up and paying for 2 newspapers because we would do Ashland anyway. And I don't have those answers for me because I've not really researched this.
There's no second to the motion.
That's correct.
We have a motion on the table. We have no second, therefore the motion dies. I'd like to make a motion that we choose the daily press for our official county newspaper. We have a second for that.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Gary Murray. All those in favor say aye. Bill?
Discussion?
Aye.
Discussion?
Go ahead. Discussion?
I guess I get the Mellon paper, and I used to get the Glidden paper. I'm from Butternut, and I get the Daily Press now. I just would like to know how many people are their subscribers in Glidden, Mellon, and Ashland. Because if we're going to designate a paper, even though I get those papers, I'd like to see the most people get it. And I think the Daily Press, as far as I know, would be the largest paper or online that people read. And that's, I think, if we're going to designate something, that's why I would be in favor of doing the press, because I believe it's a lot larger. A lot of people don't like the paper in person. I do. You know, I like to sit and read it, you know, and like I say, I read the Mellon paper too. So, yeah. So I guess, you know, I would like to find that out, how much subscription each of the papers have, online or paper copies. You know, because if there's only 300 people that get the Glidden paper and there's 700 people that get the press, either in person or online, I would go with the 700.
Marty, I have a question for you. First of all, how often does the Mellon paper come out? 1 day a week? Do they deliver?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we have a motion and a second on the table to designate the Ashland Daily Press as the county newspaper. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Number 8 on the agenda, personal time off for staff, policy clarification.
Okay, this is a clarification of the policy which was adopted by the full county board in the January meeting, basically granting staff, full-time staff, 40 additional hours of personal time off in lieu of a pay raise in 2021. That was adopted on January 12th, and that policy basically states you can't get, if you leave, you don't get cash for it, it can't be rolled into sick time. It's basically just a one-time benefit that goes away and expires on December 31st of this year. The question is, we just want to clarify the policy to state that that staff that are starting would not be granted that. The staff that start mid-year already are granted a prorated 30 hours of personal time off that they can utilize because that's our county policy. what we're basically just clarifying is that the additional 40 hours that were in lieu of a pay raise would not be granted to new staff on a prorated basis because they agreed to work for the county on the advertised price or the advertised wage. And so we're just basically saying, I'd seek a motion, move to clarify language to the policy that 40 hours applies to employees that are employed by the county as of January 1st, 2021, and not be prorated to staff who applied and were hired after that date.
Gary?
I would make that motion that it applies to the existing employees and any newly hired employees that are eligible.
Bill?
I will second that motion.
Clark, did you get the motion?
Yep, motion is written down on the board here. So yeah, so it's a first and a second. We just need to vote on it.
Okay, we have a first and second on the personal time off policy. To approve it, all those in favor say aye. Bill?
Discussion, please. Discussion. As far as I understand, that was a one-time deal. The extra time off does not transfer. It's not a reoccurring every year. It was just a bonus that 1 year. And I want everybody to understand that. It's not like we gave 40 hours plus and then kept on going. Okay, it was a one-time shot. So that's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote on this. Motion has been made and seconded to approve the personal time off policy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Number 9 on the agenda, the American Rescue Plan Act, use and process. Clark?
Yeah, I'm trying to find the right one here. Are you guys hearing a whistling in the sound? You guys hear a whistle?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's like I thought I was. I have hearing aids. I'm like, well, are my hearing aids whistling? Okay, so as you're well aware, the federal government came out with a $1.9 trillion stimulus plan or response plan to the COVID crisis pandemic. We are going to get, this is like hundreds and hundreds of pages long. There's going to be stuff coming down from everything from, broadband, public health to, economic development. There's going to be all sorts of stuff coming down. Within this packet are a couple links that you can read more about the summaries. We're waiting for the U.S. Treasury Department to give guidance. And everybody from Wisconsin County Association, National Association of Counties, we're all waiting for the Treasury Department to provide detailed guidance for what this money can be used for. That's the devil's in the details. And so what happens in these types of laws is the legislative branch passes a law, and then the administrative branch basically details it out. It says, what does it really mean? So in this case, the only thing the law says for the money that's going to be coming to the counties, in an Ashland County's allocation, and this allocation will go to all 3,000 counties across the nation based on population. Our allocation will be roughly $1.5 million sometime in May, late May, and then another $1.5 million the following May of 2022. Although there has been some discussion concerning that there could be congressional action to remove that, but I guess part of that is we'll have to see how the election goes. Anyway, The high level, that's the only thing that's in the law, is this money can be utilized, and it has to be utilized and spent by 2024 to respond to the coronavirus pandemic or its negative economic impacts, including assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, or aid to impacted industries such as tourism, travel, and hospitality. B, to replace revenues lost as a result of public health emergency caused by the pandemic for purposes of providing government services. C, to make investments in water, sewer, or broadband. D, to provide premium pay up to $13 an hour per worker in addition to a worker's usually wage or remuneration up to $25,000 for any single worker. And it kind of goes on with that. And then E, to transfer funds to private nonprofit organizations, tribal organizations, public benefit corporations involved in the transportation of passengers or cargo or special purpose units of government, of local governments. So there's a lot of questions that I have about this, and there's no answers. So you can talk to me and ask me questions about this, and I'm going to say there isn't an answer to it. One of the things I wanted to discuss with you today, and one of the things I will just say, because we're sitting in this meeting and we're all struggling with this sound system. I'm getting a bid. I'm not obligating the county to anything, but I'm getting a bid to basically outfit this room with 24 microphones, speakers, bigger TVs, cameras, in order to have something a little more professional for us to put on. So it provides a better transparency, better access for the citizens, and a more enjoyable experience for the county board themselves. We're guessing that thing's going to be around $70,000. So out of that 1.5 million. So I'm just getting a price on this because I think this is urgent enough. We're going to be coming back into the county board here on the 20th of this month for a county board meeting. And it's going to be challenging because I frankly do not want to invest $3,000 more into microphones in this system if we're going to replace them all, because the new system's going to have, something different. And so I don't want to spend money, even if it's from the federal government, for something that we're not going to be utilizing. So we're going to struggle with that with the next board meeting, but that's how it's just going to go. So why are you here today? One of the reasons is I would like this committee to ponder, how are you going to decide how to spend this $3 million? So we're going to be putting it into a separate passbook. So it's going to have its own account, because what we don't want to do is leave it in our general money market, because if we end up needing to get money for, let's say, the healthcare fund again, or we need to use it on a road project, or we need to use it just to pay wages, well, come 2024, if we spend it inappropriately, we have to pay it back. And so that is not going to work. That's not going to work for the county. So we need to put it in a separate passbook, and then we will allocate money coming out of it as we have approved expenses. And so the question for you, what's an approved expense? And how do you get there? And so I have a couple suggestions, but I'm open to, this is your money. I said we could create a subcommittee made up of board members and or community members to evaluate ideas and make recommendations to the full board. We could allocate money to another entity to manage and make community contributions. So let's say you wanted to allocate money to the business community. Well, instead of having the business community call up Clark Schroeder and say, hey, I want $3,000 because of a pandemic problem, you could offshore that to give money to, give it to AADC, pay them to manage a certain percentage of the funds for economic development, or for household supplemental help or something, or providing individual grants. These are all things which we're going to have to think about. But I'm not asking you to make those decisions today. I'm asking you to ponder how. Number 3, we could create a survey for the board and or the community input on what would be a priority for within these guidelines. So we could do a monkey survey. Now, granted, it's only going to address people that have computers and are internet savvy. You might get a few hundred responses out of our 15,000 people, but it might provide the board some guidance of what does the community think is important. the executive committee could evaluate the ideas as they come in and just make recommendations to the board. So every month, this committee could go through and basically just say, we feel this is a community good or a county good. Or the full board could set broad parameters for the executive committee to allocate the money within the limits set by the board. Meaning, county board could come back and say, hey, we're going to give the executive committee $500,000 to allocate towards some sort of community goal, and then they just decide how to allocate that. So, if you're not speaking, by the way, please mute your device or your phone. We're getting some feedback. I'd appreciate that because there's a constant ringing. If you're not speaking, please mute your microphone or your phone.
Bill?
I would kind of like to have the finance and executive committee to make these decisions, have a joint meeting, and they could set up the guidelines and stuff, and have them administer what needs to be applied for or taken care of, and then present it to the full county board. But rather than just have the executive committee, I'd like to get the finance committee involved in it too. And so I'd like to see both committees work on it jointly, and we'd have more ideas.
You want to tell them how to mute a phone? What? If they're on the phone, there's a way to mute that. Lori could tell them how.
I'm just going to do one thing real quick. I want to make sure. So it's coming from, it's not for me. He doesn't have hearing aids. It's not coming from these microphones, it's coming from somebody out there. Let me just.
Everyone is muted, other than myself and Clark.
And we don't hear that noise at the moment.
No, but it was doing it just up until the time Clark sat down just now. It was still doing that.
We hear it here.
There it is. And everyone is muted.
Hang on, let me use this. Let me mute up. Yeah, we muted us and turned our sound off, so it's not coming from in here. Is it coming?
I can hear it right here.
Is it coming from that?
No.
Doesn't look like Bert is muted.
I don't know. It's a little frustrating.
I've got
because I have
new hearing aids.
It makes me a little crazy.
I've got new hearing aids. It comes from there.
Yeah.
What? Okay. All right, we found it. We found the issue. We thank you for the patience, by the way. We were just struggling with that here. And I had some issues with that here. So I think we're good to go. All right, so Bill, you were saying, before I rudely interrupted you, you said you wanted to have the finance and executive committee get together to start setting priorities.
Have a joint meeting, and rather than the executive committee or the finance committee doing it, have the two committees together and come up with what suggestions that we need to, or what we should be doing, who we should contact, maybe, or I think the sound system is a great thing, but if we made a list of priorities or where we spend this money, and then find out if we can spend it and not have to repay it back. So if it met the criteria, right?
When will you know,
Speaking of,
Clark, when would you know which way we can go with this one? Because I'm sure we're going to kind of need that first.
Yeah, so the anticipation from the National Association for Counties, the law states that the money has to be distributed 60 days after the act was signed by President Biden. That puts the money coming into us most likely by electronic transfer at or around May 11th. They're probably gonna have guidance by then. One of the things that we saw last year, you might remember we had, we got $250,000. We got $250,000 basically for CARES money. We got another $300,000 at Health and Human Services for public health pandemic reliefs and stuff like that. And they came early with very limited guidance. And as the year progressed and people gave comments back to the administrative arm of the government, they changed the guidance and provided a little bit more looser interpretation. So that being said, we have till December 31st, 2024. We're in no rush to get this money spent. I have some ideas. I'm having the department heads, we have an online Google sheet that we have, 40 items, things that we have ideas that we could basically bring to a committee to say, here's some ideas for it. But in the long run, one of the things that I think, if this guidance is acceptable, we would most likely be able to use, hopefully, some of the ARPA money to make some of the non-mandated community contributions, as we discussed in the Finance Committee concerning the AADC, thus saving general fund money for operations, salaries, and healthcare. And so that's one of the things that, when the board approved the referendum in November of last year, obviously this was not even on the radar screen. If it's flexible enough, that could help us over the next couple years, and then we won't have to look at basically cuts or revenue enhancements until this money is gone. But that's going to have to wait till May. I can't give you any guidance right now. I just want to hear, what are your thoughts concerning how do you want to spend the money? Because, and this would be a recommendation coming from the executive committee to the county board on the 20th. That would be my suggestion, is if you have a recommendation, we basically put it on the agenda for the 20th and let the board discuss it, because it will be a board decision.
Okay, I would, this is Supervisor Metzinger. I would like to make a motion that the executive committee and the finance committee have a joint meeting and set down the guidelines and the requirements and decide before it goes to the county board, decide how the money should be spent with county board approval afterwards. That's my motion.
Supervisor Murdock, I would second that.
Did everybody hear the motion?
Yes.
Are you ready to vote on it? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 12 on the agenda. Discussion item, Department of Revenue WEDC grant for fiscal review.
I think we're on item number 10.
No, we did 10 already.
No,
We just did 9.
the confusion is that 9 and 11 are almost identical. That's the confusion.
Yeah, 11 is different than number 9, but it's related because it's benefit issues.
Okay.
So we're on number 10.
The remote work policy?
That's correct.
We already went through that.
Not this meeting.
Okay, going back to number 10, remote work policy, post-COVID.
Okay, so the county adopted a remote work policy during the current pandemic, and that's in your packet. It was adopted on June 2nd. And this policy should be reviewed for consideration for when the pandemic is over. And so with that, we basically we talked about this with the department heads, and there is controversy with having a remote work policy. Some organizations are successful at this. They have the proper guardrails in place, the proper oversight to be able to manage a workforce that is working remotely, and other organizations do not. This will be going to the county board one way or the other. If the committee wants to forward the remote work policy with the changes in there, the county board would review that, or the committee could make a recommendation to basically eliminate it as of, let's just say June 9th when school is over. So I don't need to read the policy or read the write-up because I'm assuming you've had that, but I will seek questions concerning this policy. And you can see and highlighted in red the different things. So go ahead, Marty.
Clark, do you have any idea when we could anticipate there's no longer a need for remote working?
Well, in predominantly, this is used an awful lot by Health and Human Services. Health and Human Services had a small group of people that do income maintenance work that basically have had the availability to do remote work in the past, but it was just a couple people. And I think they're probably the highest user of remote work operations. Their recommendation was basically wait till school, because if school basically goes up or down, if somebody basically has to, watch their kid, then they might lose an employee. I guess that's her concern on this. But we could certainly ask Terry Barningham, who I believe is on the line, how many people are utilizing that. Terry, are you on the line?
I am. We currently have several of our staff coming back into the agency, but we have at least 6 economic support staff who are working remotely from home on a regular basis. Most of our supervisors are able to do that. We have some in each unit who are still utilizing that. And some of the benefits for that are, we are seeing increased productivity for a lot of our staff who are able to do that. I think, when you're in a setting where there's a lot of people, there tends to be a lot of unintentional chit-chatting. You go in and talk about a work-related issue and you might get off topic. So people have less distractions when they're working from home. Some people who have worked from home found it is not for them. So not everybody who has that available to them has taken advantage of that. So really, we're leaving it up to the supervisors who know their workers, who know who can work well remotely and effectively from home. We have salaried employees who are able to do that, who are working more now than they ever have because they are working evenings, weekends, able to do that remotely from home. If you take away that remote work benefit, that will stop. We've had increased satisfaction from our workers. I think it will help with retention and recruitment. And one of the other things is, we've been doing this. We had to pivot on a dime last year in March. And we set things up extremely quickly. And we've been able to evaluate this over the year. We have not had any decrease in productivity. Like I said, a lot has been an increase. And you may not be aware, but at Health and Human Services, many of our offices are for 2 and 3 people. So when you have 2 people on the phone at the same time, 2 people in remote work meetings at the same time, it is pretty difficult to hear the clients you're working with, pretty hard to pay attention to the meeting you're in if somebody else is talking at the same time on a different subject. So we've been able to really have better communications with clients and with stakeholders. And we also have some free offices available that I'm actually looking at being able to rent out to another agency who's applying for a grant to serve our clients, youth 0 to 5 years old, that will be able to actually increase some revenues by being able to rent out that office space. And the other thing just to consider is we also have some agencies who are paying rent who we might be able to consolidate into one of our two buildings, either the downtown building or the Sanborn building, because we do have some availability of open office spaces. So that's what I can tell you, and I can take any questions you may have.
Bill.
This is Supervisor Metzinger. I received a letter from one of the employees, and it could have been a combination of employees, I don't know, but saying that it's unfair for people that are granted time off or to work from home where everybody else has to work from home, or I mean has to go to work. They're saying that that's not fair. I look at it and say, yeah, I agree with that. And I could see some of the reasons why we allowed people to work from home that with the pandemic going on. But I think that if we're going to be fair to all employees, we should require them all to come back to work. And I guess that's kind of my opinion. I don't know if we want to set a date on it, if we want to go July 1st or another date. But right now, I think the COVID shots are available to everybody. So I think that shouldn't be a reason that they are at home working. And I think, yeah, I can see more productivity from being at home, but I also see it's hard to work from home if you don't have everything. So, you know, there's a little bit each way. So I think we should decide on what we're going to do with in mind that we got to treat everybody fairly and have a policy, and that's it. And you know, I could throw the date July 1st out, but if you don't think that that's soon enough, you know, or too late, you know, if they want additional time, you know, that's kind of my feeling. But I would say now that school's going to be out, maybe July 1st. I don't know. I'd like to hear other comments from other people. Dick?
I don't have eyes behind my head. Yes, Pat.
This is Supervisor Kinney. Terry, I taught at WITC, and as we move towards more online work in the last 10, 15 years, your comments about having two people in the office doing meetings, boy, I can appreciate that, because it's really, really hard when you got two people. Having to try to tune out another conversation is mentally exhausting. When we were recording videos and doing certain things, if someone else started doing their work, we couldn't do it. There was too much background noise. The other issue that comes up in my mind is with the clients you deal with, you probably have some privacy issues where people can overhear conversations from another meeting in the same room. There might be some privacy risks there. So, but then there's a budget issue too. And if you have space you can rent out, I think as the county goes forward, every creative solution to reduce overhead and bring in some rent is going to be important too. My feeling on this is there are positions where remote work I think is fine and appropriate and works well for a variety of reasons. I think the board should consider a policy to review the positions that are allowed to work remotely and make sure there's adequate supervision so the work is getting done. You know, and so everything is, so the customers, get what they deserve at the end of the day for the tax dollars they're paying. And that's a supervision issue to make sure that's done. But when you're in tight quarters like that, it's really hard to function. And then if the county at some point does consolidate some of these buildings, if the county does use more remote work, which I think it's going to going forward for a variety of reasons, you need less office space, you've got less overhead, but even the number of times people go in and out of doors actually reduces the cost for heating and air conditioning. Some of the universities have done studies on by moving more courses to online, they literally have less traffic in and out the doors. They have lower costs for their parking lots, maintenance on their buildings, et cetera. So I think the county, like it or not, is going to do more online or remote work. And then there's also vehicles that get used. If there's less vehicle usage because more people can, do things remotely, we're going to go in that direction. But I think there should be a policy that has guidelines, guardrails, and make sure that everything is working. And I'm sorry, but some people, like the guy that works in the highway department, have to show up to work. But then there's somebody else, if they're just doing desk work, that's another story.
I think one other factor needs to be considered is the quality of the internet connection.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to demonstrate that you have a suitable office area at home. And that means the quiet, the privacy, you can put in your hours and you're not distracted with other things there. You have to demonstrate that to be able to work at home.
And that's all included in this policy, and those are really good recommendations, and we support those fully.
Yeah, and I will say from an administrative standpoint, you can see this happening all over the planet. Remote work is a thing that's coming up. It's going to be more and more acceptable. And if you're competing for jobs, competing for employees to say, you have one that you can do, flex work or remote, and the other you can't, you're not going to be recruiting employees as well. I basically came from a county where we had this, and we had a building that we built out new, and we built it out for 70% capacity. So we built it out so that not everybody could even show up, because we did not expect people to show up all at the same time. And people didn't have offices, they had little cubicles, and you would check out a cubicle online before the day you came into work. And granted, that's a different county, and everybody's culture is different. And this county is maybe, we did that in 2010, by the way. So, it's been a few years. So my recommendation is basically, reviewing this policy, making edits to this policy, and forwarding it to the county board. But this will ultimately be a board decision, and it will not be without controversy. You're going to have staff that say life isn't fair, and I want life to be fair. And that's going to be a consequence of this. And there are jobs which cannot be done remotely. If you are a receptionist and you are basically talking to the public, you don't have the opportunity to do that. If you're a correctional officer, you don't have the opportunity to do that. So yeah, it is not available to everybody. And the county board is going to have to face that fact and support this if they want to have this as something that we can use to help recruit people and retain people. But those are my thoughts.
Yes.
Supervisor Schutte here. One thing I'd like to see Bill's idea of getting the county board back in the county courthouse by July 1st, because it's okay for it to be remote out of the community, like health and human services and stuff like that. But I would like to see the county board brought back to the courthouse permanently like we did before. And I counted, there's 12 desks here if we did every other desk. We took a row of them and put them against the big table where Clark is sitting. We could put 4 tables there, and it would help keep this social distancing apart. But I would like to see the county board brought back to the courthouse.
We are having a county board meeting here on the 20th, April 20th. So basically next week we're having a board meeting here. So, and I didn't make reservations for people to show up. If whoever shows up, I think is going to have to come in and be honest to say they're going to be vaccinated and they're going to wear a mask. And we don't have the space to host 21 people here 6 feet apart. But I have gotten more than enough comments from county board members that they want to have meetings in person. And so that's what we're going to do.
Laura Negro has been sitting with her hand up for quite a while.
Is your arm getting tired?
Hey, Lori. I'm building up muscle here. On the policy, I just wanted to echo what Pat said and a little bit of Clark, but also being on the Health and Human Services Committee, even during normal times, it is a heavy burden to deal with the issues and the populations that they have to deal with. And if we can use remote working as a tool to help alleviate some of the pressure from some of our workers and to retain people, because even across we already know we can't afford to give everyone tip-top dollar. We're in competition with every other county around us if they can give a little bit more money. Remote working gives us a piece of something to negotiate with somebody for that, hey, maybe, you know, whether it's a day a week or whatever, but, you know, as long as we have a general policy enacted, I think each department head should be able to figure out if it works for different positions and use that as a tool to help keep our employees. We spend a lot of money when we have to keep training and retraining people because we can't keep them. So it's a cost-saving measure on quite a few different levels if we can keep people. And as for the county board stuff, I don't have my second shot until after that next meeting. And if we can't be 6 feet apart, I am not comfortable being in the room with everybody, even though I miss all you guys' faces. And I think for us that until everybody is comfortable with it, and the CDC really says that we can be, because with the shots, it says you can be with one other household group within your 6 feet, and if everybody's got their shots, but they're talking people in their homes, not 21 different people from 21 different areas with 21 different groups of people that they hang around with. So I am expressing my discomfort with that. So thank you, guys.
Well, one of the realities of that remote work is, you know, for example, in my case, depending on my schedule, I spend part of every day on campus. But because I could work remotely at home, that gave me a lot of flexibility. And I worked at home mostly so I could get quiet, so I could do my work and concentrate. And that was really, really nice. And the other thing Supervisor Negro mentioned, school for kids here a moment ago, I know from being on the early childhood committee at my past employment, that daycare is a huge, huge issue for people to be able to take employment. And so it's very possible that if a person could work remotely part of the day even, or some flexibility because of being able to work remotely, if they can get their kids on the bus or off the bus in school, if that remoteness helps with that schedule, you have a better pool of employees to choose from. It's just amazing how daycare is such an issue on whether people can take a job or not.
Yeah, and within the policy, I specifically call out that daycare is incompatible with remote work. Providing daycare during your portable work hours is not allowed. You know, but this basically provides more of a flexibility to be able to do that for some jobs. Well, like I say, the implementation of this will cause some hard feelings because there'll be some people that either their supervisors don't want them to work remotely because they want them there, or their job is just incompatible with it. And but are there any, I mean, you know, so we basically have a policy. Are there any, you know, you want to forward this to the county board? Do you want to retain it for further review and edit it some more before you do that? Or do you want to make a motion to eliminate remote work? Those are kind of your options in front of you.
Bill?
I guess I would like to see who it affects, how many people. Like social services, a lot of people that would be possible, people that they need to talk to. To me, there would be some advantages of having your remote, being able to work at home. But I'd like to see how many people it affects and like what departments, so we know what we're talking about. But I can definitely see the advantage of working from home. But then again, who decides what? Who decides that? I think we have to establish who is going to do it, and what departments can be given that. I went to City Hall to pay my taxes around Christmas and the door was locked. That just ticked me off. I landed up mailing it in or dropping it in the Dropbox. But if I had a question, there's nobody there. But I'm not saying that that's happening with Ashland County, because most of the offices are open. So I guess I'd like a little further study as far as how many people it affects, how many people are working from home, and what jobs they have. Maybe we would wanna, if the people that are working there are working remotely from home, that might be a good thing. But how many people is it affecting, and what jobs do they have?
Yeah, so I'll address two issues here. One, you said, how is this decided? So if you look at your packet, you'll see basically there's a remote work request form. And so your employee basically signs up, and basically this will be the equivalent of a new policy. So everybody's going to have to go through this same procedure. They basically would request this. They basically say justification for telecommunicating, provide request telecommunicating location details. When are you going to be working? Non-exempt. When are you going to be taking your meals? Obviously, you can't have an hourly person that works more than 40 hours without paying them overtime. And so they have to have scheduled breaks as federal law dictates. So you have to schedule that. Other details that would relate to the request, they basically would be listed their job, essential job functions, their job responsibilities, which they would not be able to do if they were telecommunicating. Would they have, it goes through the software, what type of software applications would they need? Do they have a laptop, cell phone, landline, broadband? What type of connection do they have? What kind of speed? IT would be basically doing tests to make sure that they have the availability from a broadband standpoint to do this. I mean, if you live in the middle of the Swamigan forest, it's not going to work for you. Supervisor then basically would review this, and are the job duties performed, conducive with telecommunicating? Can arrangements be made? This section, by the division, then they basically would make an employee would sign it, supervisor would sign it, department head would sign it, IT director would sign it, and the county administrator would sign it with comments on there. And then that would basically, they'd have to do an ergonomic assessment. So just because somebody's working remotely does not mean that we have absolved ourselves from worker comp issues. So if somebody has a really poor functioning workstation, and we are not going to be providing workstations, but if they're doing something inappropriate and they're going to get, what's with the hand? Huh? Carpal tunnel, yeah. Yeah, so it's like that. We're still responsible for those things. So they basically would have to fill out an ergonomic assessment. Looking at the chairs, looking at the keyboard, looking at the mouse, looking at the monitor, again, signed off by everybody. We have guidance concerning proper, man, look how old that is. That's got the old, look at the monitor. It's an old tube. So after that assessment is done, then there's an agreement. So basically this is where it comes back to the employee basically saying, I understand what's going to be going on with this. I will work the following location. They'll describe their schedule. They'll basically telecommute their work hours. And then they basically will initial that they understand all the different, equipment, assignments, telecommuting agreement, and then again, everybody signs it. So this is a rather long drawn out process. But this would basically be going forward, like you say, we are either going to have a telecommuting policy, or you're going to have to vote to basically eliminate the one we currently have, because the one we currently have basically is in existence until we basically decide it's not. So with that, I'll seek a motion to forward this to the county board for approval.
Do we have any other recommendations from the board?
Okay, if there's no recommendation for this county board, is there a recommendation? Is there a recommendation to bring it back to the committee with edits?
Bill?
Like I said before, I'd like to know how many people we're talking about and what offices we are talking about. So I think we should bring it up at the next meeting again. I think we definitely need a policy, and I think we should, but I think we need more information. And how many people it affects totally in the county. And that would be my recommendation. And bring it up at the next meeting. I'm not in favor of or opposed to it. I'm just saying I think we need more information.
All right, Pat?
I would, unless it's in here, I'd also ask that this be reviewed annually, because technology is going to change and et cetera. And that way it doesn't get outdated. And I agree with what you said there about that list of people, because right now we don't know who, it's hard to make a decision without having some background on who's working from where and how that's going.
Okay, so basically we'll be tabling this and bringing this back on the 11th. And until then, the current policy is in existence, and basically we're managing with the current policy anyway, so nothing really changes for our staff.
I would move that
Marty?
I would move that we table this until the next meeting.
I would second that. Berlin.
You make that motion without your mask on. I didn't get any of that.
I move that we table until the next meeting.
Okay, thank you.
I did not hear any of Marty's motion.
He said basically he wants to table it till the next meeting.
Okay.
We have a motion and a second on the table here to postpone this until the next meeting. Motion by Marty Vitek, seconded by Bill Metzinger. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, now we'll go to number 11. Discussion and action on American Rescue Plan information.
Okay, so the American Rescue Plan basically allowed the extension of Emergency Paid Sick Leave and Emergency Family Medical Leave Act to be extended until September 30th or something like that. So you might remember from last year, there was a federal, it was a must. You shall provide these benefits. And that was during the beginning, I think it was actually about a year ago in April 1st, I think, April 3rd. The Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act granted everybody that was employed I can't remember, I think it was 40 hours of time off to deal with, and they had this whole types of qualifications. You're getting a COVID test, you're a close contact, your daycare is closed due to COVID, the school is closed during COVID. There's like 6 items. And then the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act was up to 12 weeks of paid time off in order to deal with the only two options, one of which was your daycare is closed due to COVID, or your school is remote and closed due to COVID. So those benefits ran out on December 31st from the federal government as a shell. During the December meeting or the November meeting, I can't remember which one it was, maybe it was January, but anyway, the county extended it till I believe July 1st. So we basically, we're not looking at extending this because I think given the amount of vaccinations that we have in this area, I would recommend that we basically not extend the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act. In addition, there is a mandate that basically COBRA subsidies. And so if we, and I'm going to put out a memo to my staff, if somebody is terminated due to revenue shortfalls due to the pandemic, or somebody's hours are cut down to a level where they're no longer eligible for health insurance, they have a subsidy that is mandated by the federal government that they basically don't have to pay for COBRA until September for October payments, if I remember correctly. So that's a mandate. You don't have to make a decision on that because you don't get a choice. We just have to make sure that if somebody is terminated from the county, if they're terminated with cause, they're not eligible. If they're basically just terminated because we don't have money, then we do have to pay for it. Businesses and nonprofits will get some sort of tax benefit for this, reimbursement back from the federal government. It is yet to be seen. There was a gray issue in the law when they talked about how do state and county and local governments get reimbursed for this. We may not get reimbursed for that. They're still researching that. So the action for this particular item is move to voluntarily end the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act and the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act effective June 10th, 2021. And that basically, as a backup measure, if the school district closes again before their end of school year on the 9th, that would provide a benefit for people to be able to take the Emergency Family Medical Leave Act during that period between now and June 9th.
Supervisor Murdock, I'd so move.
Supervisor Metzinger?
Yes.
I will second it.
Okay, now, Gary, you want to give us your motion again?
The motion is, as we have on the thing, move to end voluntary EPLSA and EFMLA effective June 10th, 2021.
All right, did everybody get that?
Yeah.
Question.
Bill?
When does it end now?
I believe it ends, I think of my write-up, I think it ends on the July 1st. So it's just a few weeks earlier. I'm just aligning it up with the end of the school.
All right, we have a motion and a second on the table. Everybody understand the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries, thank you.
Okay, and in the write-up, I had mistakenly put in move to adopt temporary COBRA subsidy. We don't have the option. We don't have the option to not adopt that. So I just removed that because we don't get to say that.
Number 12, agenda item. Discussion of Department of Revenue WADC grant for fiscal review. Clark?
Okay, so this is the exact same item that was in the Finance Committee because there's overlapping oversight on this. And I think everybody was here. Is there any questions about this item that came up during the presentation in the Finance Committee? Yes.
Do you have any idea how familiar these two people will be with the COVID money coming from the federal government and what it can be allocated for?
The national company or the local guys?
Well, the local too.
Yeah, so the local guys, we actually sourced them out from recommendations from WCA because one of the guys in particular, he is what we would call a high-end user on the Springbrook software program. And so we've had exposure to him, or I should say Sue has, due to the user group. So all these software programs have user groups. How do you do this? And he's been part of that. He's been working with that software program for a year, and the other guy has worked with basic county finances and county finance director positions for a long time. So boots on the ground, they're good to go. The national company, basically, this is a more of a political thing, which is the Department of Revenue is directing this little operation, and there's an expression: "He who pays the band picks the tune," and so they got to pick that national company. And I basically interjected and I said, I need somebody that can be on the granular level, digging into our software, helping us to extract the proper data to see what we actually have going on.
So my question or thought would be with these two folks, as they start this work, if they're familiar with the guidelines from Treasury on what the COVID money can be used for, if they are looking at things, then if they keep an eye out for where we might be able to use money, those holes to fill.
Yeah, they'll be aware of that. Yeah, I've actually just talked to the auditors also today because we want to make sure that they have. How do we balance our budget when we produce our budget? If money, let's say we take $125,000 for the Office on Aging, and we basically say we're going to use the federal money for that instead of general levy. How does that look when we balance our budget? Do we say it's a transfer? Do we say do we count it as a revenue of $125,000 to balance the expense for that? So yeah, we're anticipating how are we going to present this to you, the board? How are we going to present this to the citizens to say, when we actually produce a balanced budget?
So they're going to be able to look at Treasury guidelines as they do their work. So if they see some holes we can fill, they can identify them for us.
We'll certainly have that conversation with them. They've had decades of financial experience. So yeah, so we would be looking for any input. My hope is that National Association for Counties, ICMA, and Wisconsin Counties Association will have a pretty good guidance for us of what we can and can't do for that.
Just something quick. Pat, those two guys are the same two that were when it was the Ellers or the two guys, it's the two guys from that.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. And my point is that if we're going to get guidance from Treasury somewhere around May 10 or 11, and we're starting with these two folks at the same time, given their experience with county budgets, that if we can, we have them look through their guidance from Treasury, if that would be within the scope of the work they do, so that as they do that work, they can identify anything that the federal money could be used for in our budget to address any issues that we have.
Yeah, we're going to be, we're going to be really stretching this. One of my fellow administrators, he basically is looking at using the clause in there that's called premium pay. He's saying, I'm going to try to, I don't know if he's serious about this, but he's like, let's cut everybody's salary from the general levy $5 an hour, and then use $5 an hour of premium pay from the federal government in order to save general levy dollars. Now, I don't know. There seems to be, there's going to be some very creative people out there, and I'm part of the administrators group for the state, and we'll certainly try to glean best practices that are allowable and legal.
that brings me to a thought I had is, if we're going to look at whether we keep all the employees or not, something the board could not decide sooner than later if it chooses is if the board says, okay, we're going to keep everybody, but we're not sure how our finances are going to look, and we're going to have this pool of money that we're going to divide up among the employees in the same ratio that we currently do, and we can't give raises more than the inflation rate. So with that, a cap on things depending on how the budget shakes out. If that pool of money does end up being smaller than the current pool of money for employees, then what you just said about using that for premium pay to not only backfill whatever deficit there would be based on current wages, but also then to give them a raise while we have an opportunity to give them a raise within the levy limits. That's something that's, I think, within the possibilities for later.
Yes, I think that's probably more clear cut than cutting somebody's wage and then supplanting the money. I think basically just using it for a raise as premium pay, I think you could probably, do that. I will say, we can even give raises to people that have basically worked through the pandemic. When we get to the point of discussing this, I would really support pulling out the correctional officers and just giving them each, whatever, $500, $1,000, something like that. Because, they've been in the trenches inside the jail with people spitting on them with COVID. And of any group that would pull out from the county, I'd pull out the correctional officers and give them some money, because it's like, I wouldn't want to do that job. And I'm thankful that they're willing to do that. But that will be a decision that you guys can talk about in May. We don't even have the money, but it's something to think about. One of the uses. Any other questions from the Department of Revenue, WEDEC financial review process? Bill?
I have a question. I know this doesn't pertain to that, but the county's talking about how to get more money. And didn't somebody bring up about a gas tax increase? Yeah, it has. We brought it up here, but did it go any further? Is this the time to go ahead and petition our legislatures to say, hey, you're cutting this, we only can raise this much money, we got to pay for this. Is there any way we could get the gas tax increased, or the sales tax? Is there any way, like when you go to Minnesota, look at what you pay there for sales tax versus Wisconsin? But it's something that, if that was a good idea, Dick, but I'm just saying, has it gone any further? Have we done anything to contact the legislatures as far as something like those two things I just mentioned?
So the sales tax is part of the governor's budget. He basically wanted to allow counties, by a vote of the referendum by the citizens, to increase their sales tax by 0.5%. And the opposite side of the spectrum in Madison basically said, no way. So that's not going to go anywhere. The gas tax, I have talked to Myers and Bewley about that, and they are like, that's never going to happen either. The legislators are in no mood for any tax increases. But if the board wants to, pass a resolution or support a resolution at the county board level to say we want this, Bewley and Myers are supportive of it. You're basically preaching to the choir, but it's the people that don't represent you are the ones that are holding back on this. So,
Clark, I think how that should be approached is not statewide, but countywide. There are counties that don't need the money. We do. And if the state is approached on that level, if they can't help us with this, we have recommendations and suggestions on how to get out of the woods here, and they're just going to trash it, then I think we should get around to discussing mandated services and how can we fund mandated services when there are no revenue streams. This is ridiculous. They can't tell us to do this and on the same, but you're on your own to figure out how to pay for it. That's BS.
Well, I think that's part of the reason why, and I've been concerned about our cash flow in 2022 and 2023. I think that's one of the reasons why the Department of Revenue is working with us on this, because they're concerned also, because if we end up in 2022 or 2023 having problems paying for things, it's going to go back to the state. State's going to have an issue. But it wouldn't hurt. There's no harm to basically producing a resolution I'll bring back in May for supporting gas tax and sales tax. The gas tax, the sales tax already got vetoed by the legislators, but we could certainly do that if people want. If people want to give me direction to bring back 2 resolutions, I will.
Is it possible that as far as have a referendum, as far as if it's necessary that each county decides itself, as far as to have a gas tax increase resolution? A referendum passed by the citizens of the county? Is that a possibility, or right now the state controls it entirely?
So right now there isn't any option. By state law, your sales tax is limited to 0.5%. You have to change state law to allow that to happen. The governor's proposal was that each county could make their own decision if the citizens approved it to add an extra 0.5 cent. That's what his proposal was. It was shot down by the legislators. The gas tax wasn't even discussed this session because there isn't any appetite for it. So but if you want to pass a resolution, we could put whatever we want in it. We could say the sky is blue, so.
Well, I guess I think we should at least try. Yeah. I agree with Dick 100% that, if we got something like the gas tax, we would pick up some additional revenue from non-county people.
That's right.
And the same thing is with the sales tax. And like I say, when you go up to Duluth and buy something, they got the sales tax, I think 7 point something,
I will, I'll bring back, since it's not on the agenda, I'll bring this back to this committee on the 11th of May.
When you write those resolutions, take a look at the wheel tax. That's the only tax that the legislature lets us impose if we choose to. It doesn't even take a referendum. The board can just do it. And I find that a little interesting because they're allowing the local municipality or county to impose that tax if they want to. And of course, the legislature knows it's an extremely regressive tax, and so I suspect that's why they said yes to it. But if you can get language from the wheel tax and why that passed, it might give you some insight into something that might help them think about passing or letting us have gas tax and sales tax increases, because that's mostly paid by locals, and they'll do that with the wheel tax. It's just that the wheel tax is regressive and the gas and sales tax might be perceived to be less regressive.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, then we'll go to number 13 on the agenda, County Board Handbook Review, and I have a comment about this, Clark. That we have in front of us, I don't know that it says what we're changing from and to.
I don't have any recommendations. This came about from, I can't tell you who wanted it on the agenda, but this revolves around the appointment of, when we did the appointment for the last county board supervisor, Dylan Jennings. And the 2 comments I got from the committee that they wanted on the agenda was, how long does it need to be advertised and where? And that's the genesis of your official county paper resolution. The second item, which this committee wanted to look at, is, it's inside my head. It was advertised. Oh, does somebody who is appointed midterm to the county board, do they assume the committee, automatically assume the committee's positions that they were on, not necessarily being chair or vice chair, but in this case, Joe Rose tragically passed away, and basically Richard appointed Dylan. Dylan assumed the committee appointments as a perfunctory task on what Joe did. Now the question is, some people on this committee wanted to say we need to write that into the language, because right now it is not. There's an assumption. There's also the assumption, and they want to delineate what does advertising mean. And so this goes into a little bit more operations. But do you want it in the official county paper? Does it have to be? Do we have to spend money to do this? We basically advertised it for, I don't know, 8 or 9 days on the internet. And Chairperson Pufall had somebody in mind. It's his prerogative to appoint whoever he wants. The county board has to ratify that. But you do have to advertise, and we did advertise online. The question is, does this committee want to basically put in the handbook that advertisement means paid advertisements?
Yeah, Supervisor Murdick, here's the question. If we had an opening, say on an appointed committee, say I'm appointed to a committee and I leave for whatever reason, I think that position, if it's appointed and clearly stated in the handbook, I don't have a problem with whoever appoints that person. Normally could appoint somebody, the new person or whomever. But if it's an elected position, I think the full county board should weigh in on whether or not the new county board member gets onto that committee, even if it's mid-term, because if you're elected to it, you should be elected. I have no problem with the county board saying, well, Gary's gone and Joe comes in his place, that the board says, normally we would elect that person, elect Joe, if that's what the full county board, but I think we should.
So you're basically differentiating between the highway committee, which is an elected committee, and let's say land conservation, which is an appointed committee.
Right. If it's appointed, I think the chair or the administrator, however it's read out here, should appoint a person. And if you pick the new person, fine, I don't have a problem with that. But if it's an elected position, I think the full county board should have some say in it and say, yeah, we have an opening, the new board member will fit perfectly, but it's an elected, so I think we should elect them. Just have the full county board do it. Now, here's my other concern. Gary dies tomorrow. I don't think whether I state something before, obviously not after, as to who my replacement is, but I'd like my wife to be on the county board. I don't think that's proper. I don't think any of us as elected officials should decide who gets to fill their position. They could make a recommendation, but I think we should have something, and it isn't going to happen today. I think we should think about how we want to put replacement board members on, because I'm going to die tomorrow, and I'm going to have tell somebody I'd like my wife on. I'm just exaggerating here, but I don't think that should come into play. I could make a recommendation that, hey, my wife is a fantastic person, but I think we have to be careful doing that. It gets to the public thinking that we're fixing the system. So I like the way we're going to advertise, and that may solve the problem. And then whoever comes forward. But I think somehow we should think about it long-term. Is there some way we should put that in here that if we have an opening on the county board short of the election, how do we fill that position?
Yeah, so here's what your handbook says that you guys have adopted. And frankly, this is your handbook. There's nothing in here that you could say everybody's got to wear a red shirt. These are your rules that you decide on yourself. So it doesn't, no skin off my nose here, but the chair shall appoint persons to vacant county board seats subject to confirmation by the majority vote of those members voting at a county board meeting. The successor shall serve for the unexpired portion of the term for which the person was appointed, unless the board orders a special election to fill the vacancy, in which case the person appointed shall serve until their successor is elected and qualified. A person so elected shall serve for the remainder of the unexpired term. Vacancies occur upon the death of an incumbent, written resignation, removal, or ceasing to be a resident of the district, or for any other reason set forth in state statutes. The chairperson shall see that advertising is done for the replacement candidate. If more than one person expresses interest, the executive committee shall conduct interviews and make recommendations to the chairperson. It is expected that the positions will be filled by the second county board meeting after vacancy occurs. So as your handbook has changed over 15 times since I got here, I don't think you guys realize you could change it. But now that you do, this is one of the sections that you did ask. We did add, the last time we talked about this, if more than one person expresses interest, the executive committee shall conduct interviews and make recommendations to the chairperson. The chairperson can ignore any recommendation that you have, but this would be an opportunity for the executive committee to conduct interviews so the chairperson could see the qualifications of these individuals.
I'm new on the county board, but I've known some county board members for a while. And this filling positions has just been a thorn for a long time. My personal view on this, from listening to county board members over the years talk about what happens when positions are filled, advertise in the paper of record, the executive committee makes a recommendation to the board, take the county board chair out of it. The executive committee simply makes that recommendation on who to forward to the board. An elected position gets elected again. So I agree with Supervisor Murdock on that. And I think the county board chair should have an opportunity to make some changes to the appointed committees, because you might have had someone leave, say, finance, that just loved finance and was good at it. And the new person might be, my God, don't put me near a number. So you might want to make a few adjustments and let the chair do that. And then I think you take away a lot of the politics, frankly, that you had on filling spots, because then it's an executive committee decision. It's a board decision on elected positions. And the chair can still tweak committees if that's appropriate.
It's my understanding state law basically mandates that the county board chairperson shall fill any vacant county board seat and be ratified by the county board. So the chairperson has to make the appointment. That's state statute. You can offer advice, but ultimately it's the chairperson's obligation to do that.
Yeah, Bill.
This is Supervisor Metzinger. I've been reading I read this line by line this time, and I got the duties of the executive committee shall consist of the county board chairperson, which always was, and the finance chairperson. And now in there, they slipped in there, plus 3 members appointed by the chairperson. That was always an elected committee. The executive committee was elected. And so was the highway committee. And so was some of these other committees. All of a sudden, this has changed. You know, I've never seen that the executive committee gets appointed by the chairperson. And I see there's administrator appointing different committees. I would rather see the chairperson appointed. You know, just because somebody suggests we do it this way, do we have to follow through and do it this way? Is what I'm saying. But like I say, this is the first I've seen about the executive committee being picked by the chairperson.
So the issue with the administrator by state statute has to appoint certain committees. So you don't have an option to do that. And so when we first adopted this back in May, when we first adopted this big change in May of 2020, court counsel weighed in and the full county board approved the list as you see who approves what. And so that's done according to the law. The committees that you have created, such as the executive committee, it's up to you to decide. The highway committee, again, is a state law that has to be elected. Okay? The executive committee, you can do random numbers. You can do whatever the board wants. If the board wants to make that an elected committee again, you can go back and do that. There's nothing. But the last time the board did this, it made that committee appointed by the chair. And so the board made that decision.
I guess the people didn't realize it when we just had an election this last April. Anybody realize that this was changed?
This was changed in like
this.
You're new.
Change.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, you're new, you know, you see something written down, okay, this is what it is. But we did have an election. I still believe, I think, as far as I'm concerned, I think this should be changed again to be elected by the county board. The whole county board, not just the chairperson. The chairperson is automatically on the committee. And the chairperson appoints the finance committee. You know, I think some of the county board's power and diversity has been taken away by putting something like that in there. You know,
Bill, it was the county board that decided to do this.
I was at every county board meeting and I never seen this come up as far as a change that the county board has made. Or, yeah, this is a suggestion. We're no longer going to do this. You know, I guess I personally maybe was sleeping or something. I missed it. But I think it's important that if there is changes, that we go through them and say, hey, this was changed, this was changed, this was changed, instead of giving us a whole stack of papers saying, okay, this is what we want you to adopt.
Yes, Kathy.
When they changed that from the executive committee, the Ag and Extension Committee was always an elected position too. That was always voted on by the full board, and now that isn't true anymore. That got changed too.
So you're in this 15th revision of this handbook. Every time this handbook has been changed, it's been track changed, highlighted in red, and talked about in meetings. This is not something that I'm doing. I have no vested interest in how you manage yourselves. These are things that basically were adopted by the board, and they were highlighted in red to do that. But if you want to change something, then just make a motion and change it back, and the whole county board will do it. I mean, you can do whatever you want. This is just a handbook.
Okay, I guess the thing is, Gary, you have been on the county board. Were you aware of this change?
I was aware, and I'll have to go back and look. I was aware when we made the track changes and we forwarded it to the full county board to approve it. I don't know the specific date, but I do know that we did change these. But,
some of them.
well, we could go back and find the motions because I know we had, because our concern at first was anytime we made a change, we wanted it either in bold or red or orange or something so we could see where it changed page. But that was done, but I don't remember the date.
They started in late 2019.
Yeah.
Right.
And early 20. I mean, it was done. I mean, but I think you should focus on basically, you need to narrow your discussion. So I need to focus on, do you want to change your handbook to delineate what that thing says about advertising? The county board chairperson shall see that advertising is done. Do you want to add some words in there that says paid advertising in a paper? Or, that's why we're here to discuss these two issues. So if you want to change those to go back to the county board, make a motion so that you can get something for them to vote on the 20th.
The agenda says a county board handbook review. And I am reviewing the county board handbook because I do not like, I don't know if anybody else feels the same as me. I think some of the stuff was just slipped in there, you know, and said, hey, we just sent all this out. Is everybody okay with it? I think that the executive committee should be elected by the county board, 3 members. And I'd like to see that changed. And I would like to make that motion. And if someone seconds it, we'll see.
I'm sorry, Bill, what was your motion?
I would say duties of the executive committee. The committee shall consist of the following: county board chairperson, serving as chairperson, finance chairperson, serving as vice chairperson, plus 3 members appointed by the chairperson. I would like to change that to plus 3 members appointed, elected by the county board.
Okay, thank you.
This is Supervisor Berlin. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Say, I would second that, but before I second that, I'd certainly like to make a comment with regards to, say, the duties of the Highway Committee. The way this is set up over there is the one representative from districts 18, 19, 20, and 21. One representative from 14, 15, 16, and 17. One district from Northern Districts 1 through 13. One from Ashland, and one at large. I think this should be a consideration to some of the other committees, not only the executive committee, but say, for instance, the duties of the public property and law enforcement committee, because these individuals are merely selected at will by the county board chair. And I think this should be taken into consideration in some of these other subcommittees. Not all subcommittees, but some of the subcommittees. So that's a representation of the Ashland County, who these people are representing. Does that make sense?
I believe those are set up by state statute.
Oh, is that? I don't know. I'm new on the board, so I don't know that.
Yeah, that's by state statute how it's divided.
But that's not to say that this board couldn't make a motion, much like Bill, Commissioner Bill is motioning right now to make this change. So the
Supervisor Berlin, did you second Bill's motion?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I would recommend that you basically deal with one motion at a time. And you can talk about another motion after that. That's how we've got 18 changes to this handbook over the last year and a half, is we just make changes periodically. And it's your responsibility as executive committee to manage the handbook and make recommendations to the county board. So
I need to concur with Bill and also Gary that this handbook needs to be massaged more, but not in its entirety today. But I second Bill's motion. Thank you.
Well, from what I remember of this debacle we got going on, is that this is the interpretation of our corp council of state law. I don't know that we changed anything.
I guess I asked Clark if the committee has a right to go ahead and designate changes if they so desire. And that's kind of where I'm coming from.
So I've not memorized all of those things. I mean, we went round and round. We had pages and pages of this information. So like Health and Human Services, that's appointed by the administrator. You don't get to change that. You can't say it's going to be elected. You can't say the chairperson's going to do that. State law dictates that. My memory of committees that are made up by the county, those are appointed by the chairperson. So like, state law doesn't say you have to have an executive committee. You could have a committee to study whatever you want. Chairperson makes those appointments. Unless the county board wants to change their handbook to say we want those to be elected. And that's certainly within the purview of the county board. In my understanding, I will have to, before I bring this county board, I will go back and double check that. But I think if you want to, the motion that is on the table is to have the executive committee be elected positions, the 3 elected positions. I don't think there's any problem with that whatsoever.
Well, what I would suggest we do, and this is just my suggestion, of course, is that we run this by corp council and see if this is something it can be changed, or is it a state statute? We can't be mucking with state statutes. I don't care how we do this, but we didn't just have this harebrained scheme that this is how it's going to happen. It was interpreted by corporation council because it was the law. So I think we should run it by him and see, can we do this or can't we do it?
Well, yeah, we would, yeah. So I wouldn't bring it to the county board unless it was something that you had the availability to do. You can't let a county board vote on something that's against state law. But like I said, my memory serves me, I think the executive committee could be turned into an elected committee. I don't think there's anything stopping you, but I will base, if this motion passes, I'll certainly research it with the corp council and then bring it to the county board if it's legal on the 20th.
Yes.
The other issue with committees that was raised a year ago is the appointments. And so when the chair makes appointments, the way it was done last year, he didn't necessarily know how the elected committees would turn out, to balance things. So something else I would suggest you look at is, could you do the elections for elected committees on the day of the reorganizational meeting? So you're going to elect the county board chair that day. And so whatever committees you have are elected, if the board elected those committees that day, then the chair and the administrator, when they make their appointments after that, they could say, okay, this person's already got 2 elected committees. I'll keep that in mind while filling out the rest of the appointments to balance it out. Because what happened last year is, the chair made some appointments, but then there was elections, and all of a sudden, this is probably pretty typical, you've got somebody maybe on 4 committees and somebody else on 2. And then another factor is trying to, and this could be in the handbook, that the chair, when making appointments, try to make as equitable as possible appointments that result in the same number of committees and meetings, something to that effect. Because somebody might have a committee like the Vaughn Library that meets pretty much every month. Somebody else might have a committee that meets once a year. So if you're going to change some language on committees, we might want to address a number of those things at once.
Yeah, Marty.
Just out of curiosity, if the chair or the administrator appoints a person to a committee, can they remove them from that committee?
I didn't hear you.
He didn't hear
Can
you.
you drop your mask? This is.
If the chair or the administrator makes an appointment to a committee, a person to a committee, can they fire them or unappoint them, or you know what I mean? Appoint somebody in their place. Can that be done?
Yes.
I don't actually know that. I mean, it may be in the handbook, but I've not read through the whole thing.
I think in the handbook, it mentions that, let's say they never show up for so many meetings. That would be a grounds to, if they had 5 meetings and he never showed up for any of them. I think it mentions in there, it mentions like 3 meetings with unexcused absence.
Yes.
That's kind of a poor cause. I'm just talking about on some, not.
So I again, bring back the conversation to, you have a first and you have a second for making the executive committee 3 members elected positions instead of appointed by the chair. I think you should deal with that issue before you stray further to other topics.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the table to change the way that the executive committee is formed to an elected committee. Motion was made by Bill Metzinger, seconded by Nick Berlin. All those in favor of changing that, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. No.
Maybe we need a roll call.
I think we need a roll call. I couldn't hear that. Lori, could you do a roll call vote on that particular motion?
Dick Pufall,
No.
Mike Berlin,
Yes.
Gary Mertig,
No.
Bill Metzinger,
Yes.
Marty Vitek.
No.
Motion failed.
Okay, going back to the topic du jour here. Do you want to delineate advertising? Because that, I mean, those are those two issues that came up that people wanted it on this agenda, which is, do you want to just add the words paid advertising?
Well, nobody's gonna do it for free, are they?
Well, we advertised on the internet
Yeah,
for
but-
Oh,
billing.
no, I don't like that. Some of the people don't even have internet. What did they?
I'll make a motion that we
That's
advertise.
why we're discussing this.
Okay, I'd make a motion that we advertise in our paper of record, and that also, if I can include it, that phrase that Clark has highlighted, if more than one person expresses interest, the executive committee shall conduct interviews and make a recommendation to the board chair.
That's already in the handbook.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys made that change like, I don't know, 6 months ago or something like that. But so the only question I would have for you, I want to make your motion for you, is if you make it the paper of record, let's say it's somebody from Butternut or Glidden, would we want to have it in that paper versus this paper?
No, the Daily Press is good. I'm not going to prolong this any more than I have to, but I get both the Glidden paper and the Mellon paper, but not everybody does. The majority of people who want to read a newspaper would get the Daily Press.
Okay.
I get those other papers.
That's good. I just want to make sure you thought about that.
Right.
So what kind of action do you want on the handbook now?
So he made a motion. We're looking for a second, and the motion is that we would add it would be advertised in the paper of record for candidates.
I'll second that motion.
Who was that, please?
That was Dick.
Thank you.
We have a motion and a second on the table. All of you guys understand the motion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed, say no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, so the second issue, which was brought to my attention that they wanted on the agenda, was, I don't even know where this would be in the handbook, but basically the appointments of a midterm supervisor would assume the committee appointments or not assume the committee appointments. So that's up to you guys to decide what you want to do. The comment I got, a couple comments I got, which is it should not be assumed that the person would automatically take the position of that person. And Gary had talked about if it was an elected position. So let's get a motion on the floor for that.
This Supervisor Murdock, I'll make a motion that a replacement supervisor, the chair can appoint them to appoint them to an appointed committee, but any elected openings that occur because of a vacancy go before the full county board for a vote.
Right. So basically, could I say this? Midterm appointments would assume appointed committee positions and have to face election at the county board for elected positions.
Well, just a clarification, appointed by the county board chair, because it's potentially possible for a county board chair not to want the new board member on a committee that he appointed someone else, or she, the county board chair. I just think you go to the chair on the appointed committees and say, who do you want to appoint? If it's a new person, that's fine. That's how it works. If they want to put somebody else on, that's fine too. And
so instead of assuming the appointed position, you want to basically just say
the county
that
board
the
chair.
county board shall also appoint the person to appoint the county board chairperson or administrator shall make appointments for this new person to be ratified by the county board, and elected committees shall face election.
Correct.
All right, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to say, when I got on the board, the guy before me was on highway, and that person with that seat got filled, however, with, I don't know if the chairman had appointed or if you guys had elected somebody to that, but I had just the public property and health and human services were this other person's committees, and I got put on those. I mean, are we going to have a shuffling of people then? Because there's only so many committees everybody can be on. So when you start pulling people off and putting people on, that changes the whole process with everybody else then too. So as you guys are doing this part, I mean, I think Bill was, when he got appointed to the board, he also just kind of took over the committees that his person had. No, they didn't do with you? Okay,
No.
so then we have no consistent procedure. Okay.
There is a method in place already that would deal with that without a new change in the handbook. If any of the county board members are opposed to an appointed member committee appointments that he would be assuming, then I could just vote him down. If you say, for instance, a new guy that I appointed in Joe's position, if somebody says, well, he can't be on this committee, he knows nothing about this committee, they could just vote down the entire appointment.
That's an excellent point.
Pardon?
That's an excellent point.
Well, it is.
Yeah. Yeah, the county board already gets to say no.
Yes.
Supervisor Burdick, would you be okay with language on the appointments to the effect of the county board chair will make recommendations for appointed committees and may also make some adjustments in current appointments that best serve the county. So if there's a little bit of latitude, maybe he tweaks a few people. If someone really wanted to be on a certain committee and now there's an opening and the new person absolutely doesn't want to be there, just so there's a little latitude. And we trust that the chair hopefully would run those by supervisors to make sure they're okay with a little shuffle if they make sense.
Well,
You know,
I don't disagree with that, and I guess there's never any thought given to it when you make midterm appointments for vacancies. I didn't ask Dylan if he wanted to be on this committee. Maybe I should have. I don't know that. This is just the way that business has been done in the past. Is that when you appoint somebody midterm, they assume the committees that the person who was replaced had. That might not be a bad point if you do that in the future. Just hear them out and see if you want to be on this committee. Maybe you're right. Maybe they don't.
It would just provide some latitude if it's something that works better, and you just do minimal changes to maybe do one or two shuffles to make things work better. That's all.
Thank you, Kathy. My thought is they're only 2-year appointments anyways, and you only serve the rest of the person's term anyhow. If you start shuffling everybody, are we gonna every couple of years have to, we've had people either not run or pass away, quite a few in the last few years. So there could be changes all the time. How do we provide the people consistency on our committees if we constantly start swapping out? What does it hurt to have somebody finish out some of these? I get the elected committees, but on just the appointed committees, shouldn't the consistency for the group be a little higher priority than swapping everything around? Because we all get to say, hey, I'd like to be on this committee when it comes up after elections.
Is this something that we can possibly think about and bring back at a later time? We're working on 3.5 hours now. I don't know if this meeting is ever going to get over. How do you guys feel about it? I mean, we have a couple more items on here yet.
But this is Supervisor Murdick. In light of that, Dick, I would withdraw my motion for further review we'll we'll discuss it in the next meeting.
Okay, we don't have to have a second. We're gonna draw the motion, do we?
No.
Okay, thanks, Gary.
So in this case, there's just one change, which is paid advertising in the paper of record. Do you just want to, in order to maybe make the next county board meeting not so long, maybe wait on that handbook? I'd be tempted not to come back to them every time we have 5 words change. I mean, it took 5 months last time to go through the handbook and make all the changes. 5 months. So I'd recommend we just basically I'll just start another one with track changes in it, and we'll just next meeting, we'll add some more language in there. If you want to change stuff, we can address it then.
Marty?
I was just gonna say that we have enough can of worms opened up already.
Okay.
Okay, are we all set with the handbook then? Are you guys satisfied with doing it?
Yep, we're just going to bring it back, and we're not going to take it to county board yet because it's just a couple words we're adding. There's no sense bringing it to the full board just to discuss that. Wait till you get a bunch of changes. And that's what happened last time. You basically spent 4 or 5 months using it and then took it to the county board.
Sure, I still got some of this left. Wow.
Did you get what I said?
No, I didn't.
Can you repeat that, Mike? Mike?
No, I just muted the phone.
Okay.
Okay, I guess we'll move along to number 14 on the agenda, discussion and action earmarks back in Congress.
Yep. So this is just for your information. Earmarks, and those of you who remember Obie, he'd bring the bacon home. Yeah. All right. So they're back. Every congressman can have 10 earmarks for their district, and they basically have to fall within a certain overall percentage of the budget and all those different things. But they have to be in by the earmarks have to be in by the 30th. I basically, I talked to the city public works director and said, maybe that would be something that the city should apply 10 or $12 million for to fix the sanitary sewer system, which flows into the lake during high water, high rain events. And I said, the county board, I'm sure would support that. I'm sure the Bayfield County Board would support that. And if we got both counties to support that for the city to stop putting stuff into the lake, that'd be a win-win-win. And this is just for your information, because they've not come back to me. They would have to, they'd have to come back before the 20th and add it to the county board on the 20th for the county board to weigh in to write a letter of support. So if we do, I'll talk to Dick and we'll add it to the agenda at that time. But part of the deal is that they have to be canned things ready to go. You just can't say, I want to put in a new veterans home. It has to be something that is planned out. There's a budget, there's plans, and the only thing I could think of was this sewer project, but I'm just bringing it to your attention in case you thought of something else that earmarks could be used for. Yes.
On the sewer projects, when I was on the city council, when we started looking at earmarks and sources of funding from that, the basic message was everybody in the country largely has the same problems, and that is something that generally does not garner support unless this is more like they're thinking COVID money and we're going to throw some money around. But sewer systems was perceived to be a local problem that locals need to do it. So I would have a plan B or C in mind too. Not that the sewers wouldn't be important, but they're really hard to get on the radar because everybody's got those problems.
Yeah, my only thought here is, granted, Lake Superior is a jewel, and you're going to garner support from people who don't even live here to say that's a good opportunity versus Brownstone, Wisconsin, the small town in the middle of nowhere, that's a little bit different. They're not putting it into Lake Superior. So that was my only idea. So I guess we'll have to see if the Public Works Department can get through the city council and ask for those earmarks too. So.
Why don't you talk to the ADC director about the proposed Lake Superior Science Center? She's got the feasibility study on that. That might be an opportunity too.
Yeah. Okay.
More discussion on the earmarks?
Yeah, that's it.
You done?
I'm done. That's it.
Okay. Moving right along to number 15, administrator updates.
We actually we did add budget process and review. You and Gary wanted this on the agenda, and one of the issues was talked about was a possible hiring freeze or other budget considerations in light of the failed referendum. We'll be on both finance and executive committees. And so I go through this and I handed this out and I posted and emailed it out. I think part of this is, we don't have the guidance from that ARPA funds. I think might be premature to talk about hiring freezes if we can utilize that money for the next few years to do that. One of my concerns from a hiring freeze, obviously, is we'd have to have the county board weigh in and pick departments that basically would be exempt automatically. The question is, would we automatically exempt deputies and correctional officers, public health staff during the pandemic, district attorney? The question is, how would we basically rank the positions? I did talk to Chairman Pufal about maybe in the law, if we find we really have to limit employment, maybe what we do is we create more barriers. So instead of just departments advertising for positions when they're open, maybe they have to come back to this committee and, kind of create a 2-month or a month-long delay process, which is this committee would hear from the department head and say why this position basically should be replaced and what are the consequences if it's not replaced. I think that might be a beneficial step in there, but I think we'd want to create some exemptions just that we don't have to come back to the committee for reoccurring openings. And I know in Health and Human Services, we have one of the programs we have is a Spark program. We have this youth program after school, and it's super successful, but they basically hire a whole mess of people that are, 10 to 20 hours a week that work with the youth. I don't see how that, and that's all grant funded, so no county levy. I don't know how that would work being nimble enough. So we want to be nimble enough to take advantage of these grants. But the same aspect I get in the long run, if we're looking at 2024, 2025, having the need to go back to the residents for more money, it would be beneficial. Can we create any more efficiencies? And I think, and for me, I think one of the things I want you to consider, I don't have the whole thing drafted out in my head, but is, instead of just saying a hiring freeze, I would think, how do we create more of that overview or impediment to automatic hiring? With that, I'll take questions.
Yeah, and I'm going to make this short because I have to leave in about 20 minutes. I have an appointment, but I'll tell you why I'm going to make a motion for a hiring freeze and what the parameters I think are. The voters twice now have voted down increases. We have to show the voters that we're at least thinking about things. Here's my motion. I'm making a motion to have an immediate hiring freeze of all departments in Ashland County. And if a department needs an employee, they come back to executive committee and request to fill that position. There are positions we will have to fill, no doubt. Clark's right. There are positions that are funded by other sources. Clark's right. But I think this committee needs to see who's hiring when. We just, in the last 4 months, had 3 or 4 positions posted in the daily press. We may have needed every one of them. I have no problem with that. But I think we need to send a message to the public that we're doing something and an immediate hiring freeze, and have the department heads come back and request why they need the position, why it can't be held off. They need it tomorrow, that's fine. But if there's positions we don't need to fill for a month or two or whenever. So my motion is to institute an immediate hiring freeze with the county board's approval from whatever date the county board meets and sets at, and then have the department heads come back to executive committee and request why they need that position. I think we send an important message to the voters of this county that we're acting on things.
I could second that because that's almost a zero-based budgeting approach to that. And I think she's on to something there. That's a good idea. I'll second.
Any more discussion? Okay. We have a motion and a second on the table. The motion is. Gary, you want to read it back?
Yeah, the motion is to provide a county board approval at the next county board meeting to institute an immediate hiring freeze with the possibility that department heads can come back to the executive committee and request to fill those positions. And at that time, we'll discuss what the need is.
Yeah, and I also got a little side comment on that. Ordinarily and this is different, and I understand that, city council proceedings, we used to have department head meetings with the city council where you could ask them if there was any places where you could do without a dump truck or a pickup truck or a squad car or whatever for one more year in order to save us $50,000 or $500,000, whatever. These discussions, I think, are important and really essential because we don't know the department mechanics of every department on the county level like the department heads do. And if they can think of something where possibly they can get by without $500,000 item for a year or two, I think that it wouldn't be a bad idea to get together with the department heads and the executive committee and just have a meeting to that effect. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I like people to help in that decision that are on the front line. People that head the department that know exactly what they need and what they don't need. Anyway, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Made by Gary Murdock and seconded by Marty Vitek. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed say no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Chair, you had jumped to the administrator updates, or did you go back to the budget process and review? Which item are we on?
We were on
15. Where are we now? 15? We're still talking about the budget.
Yeah, but he had mentioned the administrator updates, and then we delved into the budget. Are we on the budget item now?
Yeah, so we're still dealing with the budget discussion post-referendum. And so basically we talked about the hiring freeze. And then we also, at the finance committee, we talked about the timeline for the budget, which is this one right here. And so that'll be a finance committee decision, not an executive committee decision. And then this is you've seen this before. This is I think the ninth revision of how I'm going to present the budget to you, to the finance committee and the county board, basically breaking it up back into departments. So it's a little bit easier to understand, a little bit easier to read. And when we look at this budget, one of the things that we talked about, because we had a balanced budget, we're looking at increasing basically probably $250,000, $300,000, to the healthcare fund, $150,000 probably for staff raises and union staff raises. next year. That's about 450,000, 30 some odd $1,000 in travel that we took out. Optional money, putting money into the general fund to build the general fund back up. And then we took $170,000 from the road department last year from the general levy money. They had to use money from their fund, which really isn't a fund, as you're well aware. It's just a theoretical amount of money, but it really comes from the general fund to balance it. So I mean, when you think about the 938, that's where I got this from. And so as we go through that budget timeline with the finance committee, you'll see this become more refined and closer as we get involved and as we get more information from the American Rescue Plan Act to find out, can any of these line items on this spreadsheet be basically funded from the federal money? So it's going to take us a few months to get there.
So if you, on that spreadsheet that you have there, if you go to the bottom of it in the lower right, what you have in red there, what you're proposing there is to increase by using debt levy taxes 14% next year. So you have the same list of reasons why you want money that led to requesting a 14% increase. So if the voters have told us no twice on $1 million increase, I find it hard to believe that the county board is going to support a 14% increase going into this fall.
These aren't debt levy, Pat. This is all general levy money. And so this is why when I was looking at general levy, you know, in my mind, what we're going to use the money for was some of these uses right here. So if we're not going to have any more money, and probably, so we have 6.679 million is the allowable general levy, and that might change $20,000, maybe 21,000. So these were the unknowns. And so if we don't have money for these, this is what we're going to be looking to say, what can we pull out of here so we can give staff maybe an increase? And obviously healthcare, we're going to have to increase it. You know, I don't know how you're going to get around that.
But some of that, weren't you talking about using debt levy?
So that, so that's a different issue, which is in the finance committee, we had talked about utilization. So we have $1.4 million of court orders that are mandated by the court that it doesn't matter if you have money or not. You can't do anything about it. You have to pay them. And what I'm looking at is saying, let's say we were $150,000 short on our general levy. Maybe we would just add $150,000 to the debt levy to reimburse us for the court orders in order to fund something that we don't have. You know, so part of these are juggling a lot of balls, which is, you know, how much can you load off into the federal money? You know, are we going to have less positions? Are we going to have raises for staff ever again? What are we going to put into the healthcare? You know, so those are all things that we have to decide.
So if we leave the federal money aside for the moment, because we don't know the details, when you look at the budget that you have there, and I know there's some juggling in terms of how to finance it, i.e. debt levy, you know, for some things that we weren't doing in the past, what % increase are you looking at in the budget with what you have in this document?
Budget increase for what?
The 2022 budget, as you show us here, after doing some juggling to move some things to debt levy, if those things work out, what % increase are we looking at in the current document?
We haven't even started the 2022 budget. Basically, this has not gone out to any departments and nobody's reviewed it yet. Well, we're going to put that timeline we talked about, and that will come back into play. Really, the general levy has already been pretty much decided. The general levy is going to be 6.679 million. You can't change that.
Right, but the debt levy, you can.
Yeah.
So here's my concern. Last year, on July 15th, the Finance Committee voted to have you bring us back a 0% increased budget. We did not see that budget till October 15th, which was a drop dead for the Finance Committee to finish its work. And you brought us a 4.37% increase. So when I look at those numbers in that lower right, and those are the numbers that are there, that results in a 14% increase if we use debt levy and juggle balls to accomplish that. I don't think the board's going to support an increase like that, even if we could do it using debt levy or anything close to that.
I'm not recommending that.
Well, what that means then is we've got a lot of work to do to make some, what I'm going to call systemic changes into how we operate. Even that $3 million in COVID money, given that we had asked for $5 million over 5 years, even if we could find uses for all of that $3 million, that still leaves us $2 million short of what we were asking for in the referendum. And that also doesn't include the difference between our net new construction, which is the lowest in the state, and the gap between inflation, let alone the rising cost for mandated services. So what that means to me is we've got to look at making some changes to operations. So that, for example, means one of the things you mentioned is maybe the sheriff cuts back on patrols. Do we really need 2 patrols 24/7? Could we work with the city police department more to have coverage up here and lessen the burden on the county, at least for some days of the week and some hours, during the night? And are we looking at data to understand where we really need law enforcement out that much? And some of the things that they do, could we just, if we have latitude, choose not to do it? So we've got things that we're going to have to look at changing, because we can't keep doing the same things. And last year when you went through the budget process, you asked the departments, well, what do you need? And of course, they're going to tell you what they think they need. But the county is an observation. As far as I can tell, have never set up a process where the board or committees look at things and say, I'm sorry, but in this department, we're going to have to make some changes here. And we're going to have to do with a bit less. And that's really, I think, the board and the administrator's responsibility to get to that point. But the departments aren't going to give something up, unless they think everybody else is giving something up. But then there's got to be direction and guidelines, from the administrator and the board to get there. So I think we're going to have at least 3 or 4 meetings we go through the year, look at how we're going to make some changes to make this county more efficient. Because when I look at the numbers long-term, and this is everything from population decline to an aging population, we're lowest on net new construction, we're the 2nd poorest county in the state, and I don't think things are going to change in Madison anytime soon. I think it's going to be a long, long time. And the sooner we start making some of these systemic changes, including the healthcare and stuff, the better off we're going to be. We really have to make those changes. And so when I look at this, there's nothing on this that says we're addressing any of that. So when the next time we have a meeting, May 11th, I think we need to come prepared to look at details of each department and where we can start making some of these changes.
Well, that's
point of order here. We're getting way off track here. We're in the middle of administrator updates, and now all of a sudden we're back on the budget. This is another thing that can be discussed at another meeting. I don't know if you guys want to stay here all day, but I'm going to have it. Mark, do you have anything else?
Probably the only thing I would say, just back to Pat, is that's where the finance committee needs to weigh in on this schedule to say, when do you want to start the budget process? And that's the finance committee to set that schedule.
May 11th. And Chair, I did ask a few moments ago if we were back on the budget updates because you skipped it and went to administrator updates.
Yeah, so part of it is we can't get information out to the departments. Normally budgets are developed when you get 6 months worth of material so people can see what's going on. But we can see what, the less information you give the departments to develop their budgets, the less precise they are, because they don't have 6 months worth of history, if that makes sense. Normally what happens, you can see here, is you have basically finance committee would meet on the 13th and then basically kind of set the guidelines, and then we basically give 6 months worth of reports out to the department, say, here's what you've done the first 6 months. What are you going to do in 2022?
So last year, on July 15th, the finance committee voted to direct you to bring us a budget with a 0% increase. You came back in October and said you couldn't do it. So you've had more than 6 months to ponder how do we make those changes. And so, this is a year in the making. And so this means we've got to do some things differently. And what I'm suggesting is that when we come back May 11th, we look at some ways of starting to make some of those changes. And that means doing things different than the way things have been done in the past. And some of that's gonna be really hard choices and take time to understand the impacts and what changes we could make. That's what I'm
Possibly we
looking for.
can discuss this in further detail when we only have one meeting on the agenda. So that we're not here for 8 hours. Now, Clark, I have a question for you. Did you say that we're gonna have a full board meeting here? No, is that a mandatory meeting?
It's a county board meeting.
I know, but do they have the option of
Yes, in fact, we're probably gonna go forward ad infinitum with having the remote meetings options for people to do that. Because
what I would suggest, Mark, and I don't know how you feel about this, and I want these guys to weigh in on it. What I would rather see you do is keep the full board meetings at the Salem Baptist Church because of their sound system until we get something in here. This is BS.
we talked about this earlier and you agreed to have the meeting here. This is a few weeks ago. We talked about that shortly after the last board meeting. But we can certainly revisit that. I can see if they're available.
Well, I don't know, are we paying for that call up there?
Yeah, but it's only a couple $100 a month, a couple $100 a meeting.
Well, how do you guys feel about it? I like to hear what everybody has to say via a microphone. At Salem Baptist Church, you don't speak unless you're in front of the microphone. Well, this is a problem. Doesn't work.
I don't have my second shot, so I won't be in this room April 20th.
I mean, ultimately, it's a chairman's decision. It's not my decision. If you want to have it at the church, I'll make sure it's all. I don't know if it's available, but I will double check.
Well, I'm not trying to shove something down these guys' throats if they don't want to do, but I past experience with trying to hear what the hell is going on in this room, and people talking and whispering on the other side of the room, you miss half the meeting. I would just as soon finish up until we can get microphones in this room. Bill?
I think it's really adds another dimension of toughness when you have some people on Zoom and some have phones and some got live pictures, and then there's people here and the chairperson and other people don't know who to recognize, and so it's added problems.
Yeah.
It's hard to conduct an order.
Right. You throw so many more different things in there.
I think Bart's right. Get your elected chair, make the decision, and we'll live by it, whatever you decide.
Well, if we're gonna do a full board meeting, it should, at some point in time, we're gonna have to say, hey, this is mandatory. No more phone, no more internet, no more kind of BS.
I don't think we should make that option. I think if the option is there, I think we gotta allow people to have Zoom and that, I think we can't determine that. That's just like, we can determine who works for us, but as far as attending the meeting, if I have a reason I do not want to attend, then, we should honor that if it's a reasonable.
Well, you reason in the previous statement, you just said problem that we have where we got 5 different venues. Somebody on the phone wants to talk to me, I don't know what to talk to me, the room wants to talk to me, it's a nightmare.
Right, I agree.
I don't mind the meeting coming back in the room, I'm just not gonna be here. So that's one less person here as far as fitting everybody in.
But now, if you had it at the church, would you?
I would at the church because I can have enough space. I don't get my second shot till April 28th.
Well,
so I'm just.
If the chairperson decides, I don't have a problem with whatever you decide. If you want to have it at the church, have it at the church.
It doesn't matter to me. I'm where
We're gonna set a meeting date?
The meeting date for these guys will be the 11th, and county board meeting is on the 20th. And I will basically, it sounds like Dick wants to have it back in the church, right?
20th of what?
20th, the county board meeting next week on the 20th, you want to have it back in the church?
I would just assume.
It'll be at the church.
I'll make a motion we adjourn.
I will double check to make sure the church is available because I did not reserve it the last meeting because you and I talked about having it here. So, all right. Dave?
I did not hear who made the motion or the second to adjourn.
Marty voted, Bill second. And everybody walked out of the room, so I guess. All right.